My brother and I had matriculated at Georgetown University Law School intending to become lawyers. We didn't have any money, but I did have the ability to write, and I promised that I would write stories about successful men, sell them to magazines, and pay our way through. And my first assignment, fortunately, was with Andrew Carnegie in Pittsburgh. He gave me 3 hours. And when the 3 hours were over, he said, now, this interview is just beginning. Come on out the house, stay all night, and after dinner, we'll take up the interview again. He kept me there 3 days and nights. And believe you me, I was more than flattered. I wondered what it was all about. He kept talking to me about the need for a new philosophy. He said, we've had many philosophies from the days of Socrates and Plato on down to the days of William James and Emerson, but most of them dealt with the moral laws of life. What we need is an economic philosophy for the man of the streets that will enable him to make use of the know-how gained by men like myself over a lifetime of experience. Well, it sounded very nice to me, except for one thing. I didn't know exactly what that word philosophy meant. And finally, at the end of the third day, he said, now look here, I have been talking to you for 3 days about the need for a new philosophy, and I'm going to ask you a question about it. If I commission you to become the author of this philosophy, give you letters of introduction to men whose experiences you will need in collaboration with yourself, are you willing to put in 20 years of research, because that's how long it will take, paying your own way as you go along without any subsidy from me, yes or no? Ladies and gentlemen, there have been many times in my life when I have faced difficult problems and difficult decisions, and I don't think I ever faced one more embarrassing than that. Because when Mr. Carnegie put that proposition to me, my hand was down in my pocket, and I was fiddling with the money that I had there, just about enough to get back to Washington, and if I'd had to stay at a hotel instead of Mr. Carnegie's house, I wouldn't have had that much. I didn't even know the meaning of the word philosophy, and here the richest man in the world wanted me to go to work for him for 20 years without pay. Wasn't that a situation for you? I started to tell Mr. Carnegie, I started to do just exactly what you or the most of us people would have done under the same circumstances. And what do you think that was? What would you have done if you would have faced that sort of proposition, going to work for 20 years without any pay for the richest man in the world? Well, yes, that's what I was about to do. But something inside of me wouldn't let me open my mouth until I got a hunch that if Mr. Carnegie had kept me there for 3 days, it must have been for a purpose. That he must have seen something in me that I didn't know was there. Also, that a man with Mr. Carnegie's reputation for picking men certainly didn't pick me to do a job like that unless he knew I had the ability to do it. And whatever this something was, this silent, invisible person that was standing, looking over my shoulder and whispering in my ear, said, go ahead and tell him yes. I said, Mr. Carnegie, I not only will accept the commission, sir, but you may depend upon it that I will complete it. He said, I like the way you ended that sentence up, and I think you'll do it. You have the job. The only contribution Mr. Carnegie ever made to me outside of introducing me where I needed to be introduced was to pay my expenses in the early part of my relationship with him. The first man he sent me to see was Henry Ford. Now, he said, I want you to go up to Detroit, become acquainted with Henry Ford, observe him carefully, because one of these days he's going to dominate the motor industry. And it's going to be second only to the steel industry. This was in 1908, the late fall of 1908, ladies and gentlemen. I went up there and spent 2 days trying to find Ford, and when I did find him, he came out of the rear of a shop where he'd been doing some experimenting with an old pair of overalls on, a plug hat or a derby hat that had been bashed in the crown, grease all over his hands. I remember he got my shirt sleeves dirty when I shook hands with him. And I sat down for a half hour with Mr. Ford, and about all of his conversation consisted of yes and no, mostly no. And I wondered how a man like Mr. Carnegie could have made a mistake like that. Imagine if Mr. Ford would ever be a leader in anything. Well, I won't tell you the rest of it. That's enough. It has been said that I have made more successful men than any man living today. I don't know whether that's true or not, because there's no way of getting accurate statistics. But ladies and gentlemen, when I When I take inventory of the people that I do know who started at scratch and have become millionaires, and some of them not quite that much money, but become profoundly successful, I recognize that I have created a philosophy here through the good work of Mr. Carnegie that's been a benefactor to the world, not only to those who are living now, but to those who are not yet born. When Mr. Carnegie sold me on organizing this philosophy, he said, I'm going to give away my money before I die as fast as I can find ways and means of giving it away without doing damage. And as you, of course, know, he did just that. He gave it away for educational purposes, libraries, foundations for the maintenance of peace, and in every way that he could conceive. But he said, by far the greatest part of my riches I am entrusting to you to take to the people of the world in the form of the know-how through which I gain my money. And he said, if you carry through the trust and perfect your job, as I sincerely believe you will, you'll live to see the time when you're far and away richer than I am, and when you will have made many more successful men than I have ever made. And ladies and gentlemen, when Mr. Carnegie made that statement, it was just too much for me to swallow. I thought, well, Mr. Carnegie has never flattered me before. He's never said anything that didn't turn out to be right, but that's just one of those things that never could happen. I have already made thousands of times more successful men than Mr. Carnegie ever had. Thousands of times, and I'm still in the process of making. You know, ladies and gentlemen, during those 20 years of research that I put into the building of this philosophy, I ran into some very profound facts and truths. And one of them consists in this fact, that when a great crisis comes over the world, there always comes out some unknown with the formula for dissolving that crisis. Like Abraham Lincoln, for instance, in the time of need, when this country was about to be split asunder by internal strife. By George Washington preceding Lincoln. By Franklin D. Roosevelt at the time when the people were stampeded with fear and they were standing in great lines to draw their money out of the bank. And I sometimes wonder if this hand of destiny, which has such a long arm behind it, doesn't reach over in places like the one where I was born and lift out people out of humble and lowly stations and give them great jobs to do in life as an inspiration and an object lesson to other people to show what can be done when one recognizes the God-given power of thought and puts it to proper use. Because if you really and truly tune in on the main line of my source of faith and my source of enthusiasm, become indoctrinated with this philosophy, no matter what it is that you're doing in life, what it is you want to do, you'll find a way always open, and I thank you very much. Thank you.